What's up guys, my name is Marc Steiner, and today we're going to be comparing the Airpods Max to the brand new Sony XM6. Let's get right into it. Almost 5 years since my first Sony vs Airpods Max video, and here we are. Now onto the third iteration of Sony headphones that have come out since the release of Airpods Max, while Apple hasn't updated their headphones in any significant way since 2020. When those headphones originally came out, they were incredible for multiple reasons, but some of the reasons why I love the Airpods Max have now turned into reasons why I have massive gripes with them. So let's start with the physical design of the headphones. The Sony XM6 bring back the ability to fold headphones, something we haven't seen since the XM4s, whereas the Airpods Max still only rotate their ear cups and lay flat, with a significantly larger footprint. The Airpods Max are made completely of metal, whereas the Sony XM6s are made completely of plastic. Now, you might think that the XM6s have a worse build quality than the Airpods Max because of the material choice here, but when it comes to headphones, what you actually want is comfort. And this is where the Sony XM6s take their first massive win. Because of that material choice, the Airpods Max are just not comfortable, and you cannot listen to them for long extended periods of time without your head starting to hurt. I've since gotten used to lighter headphones or earbuds, and when I put the Airpods Max on my head, it is just painful. I cannot have them on my head for more than 45 minutes because it actually hurts. Whereas the Sony XM6s are some of, if not the most comfortable headphone I have ever worn. The cushioning on the headband and ear cups make these feel weightless, and I could listen to these for hours. The Airpods Max have always had a very tight fit on the head because of that metallic pressure, but now, because of the redesign and the ability to fold, the XM6 have significantly better clamping force than the previous generation, and they fit on my head a lot better and more securely. And most importantly, not in a painful way. I tend to wear hats a lot, so I have to take into account whether or not these headphones fit well even if I'm wearing headwear, and I can say that both of them fit pretty well even if I'm wearing a hat. These headphones take a very different approach when it comes to controls and ports. The crown, which feels like an Apple Watch dial, controls volume, play and pause, next and previous song, as well as accepting and ending calls. And the other button is the toggle between noise cancelling and transparency mode. The Sonys, on the other hand, keep the same button and touchpad layout as the previous generation, but much improved. The touchpad is even more accurate, and I found myself not having to repeat swipes to get what I wanted. Swipe up for volume up, down to decrease the volume, forward for the next song, back for the previous song, and double tap to play and pause music and accept and end phone calls. You can also cover the right ear cup to briefly enter transparency mode. For the first time on Sony headphones, you can swipe and hold to actually increase and decrease the volume continuously, which is a nice feature. Unlike the AirPod Max, the Sony XM6 feature a 3.5mm jack, a USB-C port, a newly redesigned power button, as well as a button to switch between ambient mode and noise cancelling. You can also program that button to be the voice assistant of your choice. You also get head tracking capabilities, so you can accept and decline calls with just the nod or shake of a head. The Sonys come with an actual protective case that you can put the headphones in, whereas the Airpods Max have the same bralette-style silicone case that really just powers them off. There's no dedicated power button on these headphones. When it comes to design and comfort, the Sony XM6s win hands down in this category, whereas when it comes to controls, both headphones have a good implementation of controls. It really just comes down to personal preference and what you prefer. Both are perfectly fine in my mind. Battery life on the Airpods Max is rated for 20 hours, where it is rated for 30 hours on the Sony XM6. Charge time is also a lot faster on the Sonys, and you can quick charge and get a lot more juice to go about your day if you're in a hurry, whereas you don't really get that feature on the Airpods Max. Let's move on to noise cancellation. These are two of the best headphones on the market when it comes to noise cancelling. Every iteration of the Sonys gets better and better, and this one is no exception. Before you even turn them on, the passive isolation of the Sony XM6s is impressive, and when you turn the noise cancelling on, you're really in your own little world. I've worn both of these on trains, boats, next to rush hour traffic, walking on the sidewalk, and both of them do a very good job of noise cancelling in all of these areas. But I do feel like the Sonys have a slight edge this year with their updated noise cancelling chip and the better overall noise isolation from just the headphones themselves. In my opinion, the Sony XM6s edge out the AirPods Max in terms of noise cancelling because they have that new noise cancelling chip, as well as better passive noise isolation. But the fact that the AirPods Max are almost 5 years old at this point and are still performing at that level is quite impressive. Let's move on to the opposite of noise cancellation, transparency mode. Something that absolutely blew my mind when the AirPods Max first came out was how good the transparency mode was and how far ahead of the competition they were. No one could touch Apple when it came to this one feature. But now, Sony has closed the gap. This feature was a really weak spot for Sony in the past with the XM4 and XM5s, but on the XM6s, they've really closed the gap and are now equal to where the AirPods Max are. If I had to get really nitpicky, I would still give a small edge to the AirPods Max just because of how natural they sound. And aside from the massive weight on my head, I wouldn't be able to tell if I had headphones on or off with this transparency mode. Whereas with the XM6s, I still can recognize that there is something on my head that is pumping in the outside world, whereas on the AirPods Max, it feels incredibly natural, especially from my point of view. If I am the one talking, the AirPods Max do a better job of picking up my voice and making it sound like there's nothing on my head. Whereas the XM6s, while they do a great job of bringing in the outside world to my head, they don't sound the most natural when I'm the one speaking. But in terms of overall usability of this function, the Sony XM6s do a very good job of implementing this, and the gap has now been closed. Let's talk microphone quality. I've had almost 5 years of taking meetings, calls, FaceTimes using my AirPods Max, and they still hold up. The call quality is really good on these. However, the microphones on the new XM6 are really, really good. And when I was out in the wild testing them with all the different settings, they did a better job of rejecting noise in loud situations and making my voice still very audible to the person on the other end of the line. This is the kind of microphone quality you can expect to get out of the Sony XM6s in a relatively quiet indoor environment. So if you're taking some meetings, Zoom calls, phone calls in this kind of environment, this is what you can expect the other person at the end of the line to hear. And this is the kind of microphone quality you can expect from the AirPod Max in this kind of quiet indoor environment. So if you're taking any Zoom calls, meetings, phone calls, whatever, this is the kind of audio quality you can expect the other person to be hearing. All right, because it's raining outside, I wanted to test what the microphone quality would sound like in a loud city environment. And so we have the Soundcore X600 blasted at 100% with city noises. So now you can hear how the AirPods Max sound in this kind of loud environment. How do I sound? Is it rejecting stuff pretty well? And just like the AirPods Max, we are using the same exact audio setup, the Soundcore X600 blasted at 100% with loud city environment noises. I am now using the microphone from the Sony XM6. This is the kind of sound rejection and isolation you can expect from these headphones in a very loud city environment. I've been taking all my usual calls while testing the XM6s, and one thing that stood out to me is quite a few people actually told me I sounded better. They didn't know that I was testing the new XM6s, but they could tell that my microphone quality was better. I think in quiet environments, the microphone quality is about the same, and it comes down to personal preference about how it does your voice specifically. But I think in louder environments, the Sony XM6s do a better job of isolating your voice and rejecting outside noise. So you are the center of attention when it comes to the other person on the line. And I think that's the most important thing here, because you're not using these solely in just a quiet environment. You might be using them probably in very loud environments, and that's why you're getting these noise canceling capabilities. So if you're taking a call in those kind of situations, the XM6s are the clear winner here. Let's move on to connectivity. The beauty of being part of the Apple ecosystem is that things just work. Your devices pair with all your other devices and you can switch seamlessly between them. And the AirPods Max, while they didn't do this initially, since have gotten a lot of updates and are a lot better with this. And because you're part of the Apple ecosystem, you can easily swap between all of your devices. The Sony XM6s are still limited to connecting to 2 devices at once, but it is really good. This feature has gotten better and better over the past 3 generations, and this is by far the best implementation yet. And what really blew my mind is that even though these connect to just 2 devices, I would say the switching between those 2 devices is faster than switching within the Apple ecosystem. The fact that a third-party manufacturer has created something that outcompetes Apple's own proprietary version of it is really impressive. The fact that I was able to switch between my laptop and my iPhone instantaneously, especially while trying to trick it up and make sure it wasn't able to switch and confuse it and potentially disconnect it, none of that ever happened. The connection was super stable, the connection was fast, reliable, it was uncanny. I really felt like this was performing better than any auto switching capability of any AirPods device. Color me impressed and very happy. So this one is a bit of a toss-up, because even though the AirPods Max are able to connect to more devices and a little bit more seamlessly, the two devices that the XM6 do connect to, they do a better job of connecting and switching between than the AirPods Max. So I guess it really comes down to how deep into the Apple ecosystem are you, and how often are you switching between all your devices? Because if you're like most people and you're switching between your phone and your laptop, the Sonys are the better way to go here. And now on to the biggest factor, sound quality. And I'm not gonna lie, after the disappointment of the XM5s, I was a little apprehensive in this category. I didn't know what to expect with the XM6s, but I'm very happy to report that the XM6s are back on form and they sound incredible. Even if Apple is doing some things behind the scenes to limit the sound quality on third-party devices, you can't tell on these headphones. The XM6 are using brand new, completely redesigned 30mm drivers, and they sound great. Straight out of the box, I wasn't the biggest fan of the Sony profile that they have on there. I know they talk about how they do all their engineering and whatnot every single time they come out with a new headphone, but I always hop into the 10-band EQ and just dial it in from there and find something that suits my needs best. I will always give extra brownie points to brands that allow you to tweak and customize your EQ to your heart's content, and Sony is one of the best out there, giving you a lot of options to not only find an EQ that suits you best, but to dial in your specific wants and needs. Apple, on the other hand, has the complete opposite vision, that you are just going to get what they give you because it is the best thing possible. And both brands sound really good. Even though AirPods Max are almost 5 years old at this point, they still sound incredible. And when I'm comparing and tweaking the EQ, I always kind of try and benchmark the AirPods Max and get the EQ to sound as good as Apple does, because even though you get zero customization on the AirPods Max, they do sound incredible. Even 5 years later, you're still getting incredible sound quality that's hard to replicate on these headphones. And yes, there is some on-device magic happening on the Apple side, because you get some on-device processing, which really does help with sound quality. You get the wonderful spatial audio, and it just works better with Apple products. But if you're not someone who uses Apple, then obviously, there's a no-brainer choice here. The Sony XM6s are the way to go, because the Apples are not going to sound good on any non-Apple product. So if you're an iPhone user, I would say the XM6s and the AirPods Max are basically tied when it comes to sound quality. It really depends if you like Apple's sound and the features they offer, or if you like dialing in your specific EQ and all the features that the Sony has. If you're not an Apple user, well, there's a clear winner here, and it's not the AirPods Max. After the Sony XM5 disappointed me and took a loss to the AirPods Max, the XM6 are back on form and are either tying or outcompeting the AirPods Max in every aspect. Not particularly surprising, considering that the AirPods Max are almost 5 years old and the XM6s are brand new with the latest and greatest bleeding edge tech. But the fact the AirPods Max are still holding up 5 years later just goes to show how good they are in so many ways. But if you haven't already decided on all the other factors I've talked about and you need a clear winner, I would say go with the XM6s. They come in cheaper than the AirPods Max, they are far more comfortable, they have a lot more battery life than the AirPods Max, they fold, they have a lot of advantages that just make sense. Retail pricing still puts the price of the AirPods Max at $550 before Apple Care and tax, whereas the Sonys come in at $450. Even the advantage that the AirPods Max have with the Apple ecosystem is made a lot less relevant because of how good the Sony XM6 are. So until Apple comes out with a proper second generation AirPod Max, I'd be hard pressed to find a reason to pick these up over the Sonys. But I want to know what you guys think. Are you going to be picking these up? Do you think the AirPods Max still reign king? Let me know in the comment section down below. My name is Marc Steiner, and I will see you next time.